So here comes lesson two. I've decided to give up the idea of something that I said in the first video, which was dropping the entire season all at once. I think there's going to be modifications as we go along. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to go through lesson number two. So we'll have 1 and 2 ready to go. Lesson 1 being the introductory, probably the shortest that you'll have to view for the term. So lesson number 2 is on strategic alignment and how we align human resources with an organization and how we can best also help an organization to align with employee values and have employees align with organizational values. So you often hear this notion of a strategic management system, and that's simply a way of saying what are the goals that we're laying out for an organization, how are we going to try to achieve those goals. And I believe, as I said in lesson 1, so important for human resources to be at the table, to be discussing organizational goals, the goals of any particular subdivision of the organization. So in the city, we had not just city administration, but we had 10 constituent departments. So parks and recreation, the police department, the fire department, the Rochester Public Library, environmental services, the finance department, the budget department. So we had 10 different, depending on how you count, we had 10 different departments within city government. And human resources would partner with each of those to help identify goals and ultimately to reach goals. So we're going to talk just a little bit about that and how we try to do that. One of the common tools used, and an assignment coming out of this week's lesson that you will have to do, is to complete a strategic plan for your agency or for an agency. So strategic plans will include some or all of the following. There will be a vision. The vision is that aspirational thing that you want to someday achieve. It's almost pie in the sky. We want to be the best. We want to be the world leader. We want to be nationally recognized for whatever the services that you provide. Okay. You will sometimes have a statement of organizational values. I will share an example of that shortly. The mission is, what are we doing now? What are we doing today and every day to help us perhaps one day achieve what seems to be the unattainable, the vision, the pie in the sky? Who are our customers? Who do we serve? Who do we collaborate with? What are the key result areas? Key result areas are those 5 or 6 things that you must do and you must do well, or you simply can cease to exist. So think about what that would be for an HR function in an agency. How would you measure those key result areas? What measures would you put in place? Measures are often expressed as a percentage of or a number of to show growth or movement. What strategies would you employ to improve your success? And then finally, you get down to, what are we doing today? That's the action plan. Who's doing what and when? That's very short term. But what are we doing today to impact the strategy, to impact the measure, to impact the key result area, and on up? So if you do this correctly, you can literally draw a straight line from that aspirational vision down to the action plan for what we're doing today. I sometimes use a baseball analogy. Sorry, I'm not going to go through point by point, but think about, what would the vision be for a Major League Baseball player other than to get through a season of COVID? What would the vision be? Would it be to be a home run leader? Would it be to win a World Series? Or is there something even more aspirational? Think about that for 3, 2, 1. The answer is to be recognized as one of the immortals of the game, to be enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame, or a Football Hall of Fame, or a Basketball Hall of Fame, or a Great Americans Hall of Fame. Okay, that's the aspirational. Maybe you can get there someday, and maybe you can't, but that's what you're striving for. What is the action plan for today? Let's just take it all the way down, drill it all the way down to the last point. What's the action plan? It may be to work with a coach today. It may be to take extra batting practice or extra fielding practice or extra weight work. So that would be the thing that you're going to do today. And think about some of those steps in between. You know, who are the customers? What are the key result areas for a major league athlete? How would you measure it? Those are easy. Actually, measures are easy if you think about any sport, any sport. So this is a slide that takes you to a link that explores vision, mission, objectives, strategies, and actions much more thoroughly. This is a real deep dive. I would encourage you to take a look at it to help have a thorough understanding as to how a human resource function can align with organizational values. So an example I'm giving you here is the college at Brockport. And this is the college's vision to provide liberal arts professional education, the success of its students, committed to advancing teaching. That's the mission statement, actually, not a vision. That's the mission statement of the college at Brockport. So what does human resources have to say about supporting the college mission? And here it is. Very human resourcey. Human Resources provides the college with consultation, innovative solutions in the areas of personnel, payroll, benefits, affirmative action, assists in hiring, retaining, developing, and rewarding a highly qualified workforce. Meat and potatoes of HR. Meat and potatoes of HR. That's how the Human Resource Office on campus at the college is going to support the college in achieving its mission. So I had to go and find glasses to read the screen. I took a look at vision and I couldn't see a word that it said. So pay attention to the city's vision that we would share with employees, and then values and guiding principles that were expectations of us all. So the city's vision: Rochester, New York will be the best mid-sized city in the United States in which to live, raise a family, visit, and grow a business. Our city will be renowned for its safe neighborhoods, vibrant economy, educational excellence, and customer service. If I were to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how close are we to that? I probably wouldn't get any 9s or 10s. 7 or 8s, 4s, 5s, 6s. But you see, the point is, it's aspirational. It's aspirational. We don't want to be as good as, who should I pick on? As good as Utica, New York. I used to pick on Buffalo, but Buffalo's come a long way with its reputation over the past few years. But you don't motivate people by saying, hey, let's be as good as. Okay, so that's not what we aspire to. We aspire to be the best. And then we also would share with our employees what values do we as an organization deem as important. So personal integrity, how we conduct ourselves; accountability, how we hold ourselves accountable; customer focus; collaboration, both internally and externally, external partners; that we are a diverse organization, certainly serve a very diverse city, have very diverse population and employee workforce. And then finally, the last one is to have a can-do attitude, which I always took as sort of just a statement of empowerment. To say yes as often as you can say yes. To deliver as often and as quickly as you can deliver. So I think honestly meant to be an empowering statement. So those would be shared with our employees, and something that I did at every new employee orientation that we would conduct monthly. So the city's human resource mission statement, notice the similarity to Brockport. HR is HR. It's not going to vary much from organization to organization, even regardless of the size of the organization. So see how we word this. We support the city's vision by recruiting, selecting, developing, retaining an inclusive, talented, and diverse dynamic workforce. providing collaborative human resource solutions, encouraging, recognizing workforce excellence, providing an environment where expectations are clear and communicated. So HR is HR. The city's human resource key result areas were our customer focus. We are only as good as our satisfied customers. And for us, customers would be an exam taker, a job applicant, a constituent city department who's trying to do hiring for its workforce. So a variety of customers we have. Strategic partners, who do we work with to achieve our goals? Again, those could be the city's 10 departments. It could be consultants that we work with in the training area. I certainly had a number of education and training consultants that I worked with to deliver programs to city employees. So what kind of partnerships do we have? Department effectiveness was meant to measure how did we relate to each other. So the city had a very large 36-person human resource department, and we were so diverse in our functions. So imagine staffing and training and civil service and benefits and safety. These are all people talking different languages. So how do we function as a team? How do we come together and relate to each other and share information with each other? So that was department effectiveness. Recruitment and hiring, kind of the nuts and bolts of HR. Employee development and retention, sounds familiar. And then almost every city department would include in its key result areas fiscal accountability. Fiscal accountability, simply because probably for the last 20 years of my career, I never lived through a budget cycle that didn't have a multi-million-dollar budget deficit. So we just sort of bake that in to our key result areas, each and every department. Your assignment is going to be what I call a one-page strategic plan, a one-page strategic plan. All right, it's both sides, it's two sides of a page, but glasses on. It's two sides of a page, and you're going to go through what is the vision, the aspirational statement, what is the mission, the day-to-day work, what are the key result areas. I don't have the flip side of the page here, but you're going to go through then how do you measure those key result areas? What strategies would you put in place to impact them? And then what is the action plan? Who's going to be doing what in the next little bit to achieve the plan? I want to talk a little bit about this distinction that I like to make, and that is the top subject of topic paper number 1 between affirmative action, diversity, and managing an inclusive workforce. And I want you folks to do a real deeper drill down into this when you do the topic paper. Okay, so I'm going to share with you the distinctions as I see it, and with a caveat. The caveat is that many times today you will see D and I, diversity and inclusiveness, kind of lumped together. And what I'm suggesting here is a different take on it, a slightly different take on it, which is to say that diversity is one mode and inclusiveness is a management function. How do you manage the diverse workforce, right? So in the 1960s through the 70s, affirmative action was legal remedy to perceived real discriminatory practices in society. Okay? Diversity became a bit of an outgrowth of that. Diversity was more of a voluntary business approach, recognition of a changing culture. We in the 1970s, 80s were becoming a much more diverse culture. Business and industry recognized that and took positive steps in diversifying its workforce and recognizing the diversity within workforce. Today, with the rise of millennials in the workforce, we talk about managing an inclusive workforce. And that is in part understanding that individuals will bring their own values into an organization, and as much as a business wants employees to align with the business values, it too must align with the values of of its workforce. So what's important to you? How do we recruit? How do we retain employees? Partly by sending the message that they are valued and that their values, their individual values, are important to the organization. Okay, here's a graphic on the 3 eras of affirmative action, diversity, and inclusiveness. Affirmative action, 1964, a very specific year. It doesn't say 1960s, it says 1964. Certainly, and you will find in your research, there were events and occasions that advanced affirmative action well before 1964. But it says 64 there specifically because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which included Title VII, which was the prohibition of employment discrimination practices, and also created the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which a few years later in the early 1970s was given prosecutorial power when cases were brought against business and industry, government, and academia. So very aggressive push to correct the perceived and very real social ills that preceded the 1960s. So legal remedy, legal mandate. Not long following legal mandate comes legal challenge. And by the late 1970s in particular, into the Reagan years of the 1980s, there was great pushback to affirmative action. If I said to you, if I tossed out the term reverse discrimination, and what might that call to mind for you? So the claim that, I, a majority individual, is being discriminated against because of affirmative action plans that a company has in place. I haven't gotten a fair deal. So there was a lot of legal pushback, but something curious was happening in society nevertheless. We were becoming a more diverse people, and it became simply good business practice to voluntarily embrace the notion of diversity. So you see 1990s into the 2000s. The thing that distinguishes it is that it becomes largely a voluntary embrace of diversity in the workplace. The cynical part of me sometimes feels, follow the money. I said good business practice, good for the bottom line. And it was and is that. Okay. Affirmative action and diversity are basically both directed at the same thing, the composition of the workforce. So there's a slide somewhere down the line that says affirmative action and diversity is who gets to go to the party or who gets to go to the dance. So inclusiveness, managing an inclusive workforce, is how do you manage? What's the management system that you have in place for that diverse workforce? Okay, especially given the rise of millennials and expectations in the workforce. So I, a boomer, had that very linear professional life. I started and I ended at a certain point and spent 30 years more in city government in my role. I believe that now we see that millennials and Generation Z, the average life expectancy in a place of work is something like 5 years or 6 or 7 or 8 career changes. So how do you appeal to this generation that's going to churn through an organization? How do you appeal to it? How do you keep them engaged? How do you maximize productivity, increase employee engagement? It's by management practices. So this simply says that equal employment opportunity laws prohibit discrimination in the workplace. They don't always, and now more and more rare, that they would require formal affirmative action plans. Okay. Sometimes employers, recognizing problems or responding to lawsuits, will formally enter into an affirmative action plan, an affirmative action program with the federal government as a way to mitigate any lawsuits or any claims against it to try to correct employment practices. So if you do if you do have an affirmative action plan, and these are largely now found in government and academia, still several places outside of those two arenas. But if you have an affirmative action plan, you see that header says to create a workforce that's reflective of an area in which an organization operates. So I'm going to show you in just a moment how you would arrive at these numbers. Um, Not as difficult, not as exact as you might expect. Um, but let's take a typical organization that has 60 management types in it. There's a minority workforce availability of 10%. Again, an imprecise number, but a number that you can find nevertheless to help you chart your course. Minority availability of 10%, meaning that there should be 6 minority individuals in your management ranks of 60. You currently have 3. Your affirmative action plan would be a hiring goal of 3 additional. Okay. Then as you work your way down the professional ranks, skilled craft trades, I take it down to maintenance because it's low skill. And so suddenly we don't have a hiring problem. We have 168 maintenance individuals in the organization. There's a minority availability of 31%, which would leave us at a goal of 52. We have 57. We fill the bottom ranks easily, don't we? And that's an interesting issue for an organization to look at if this is the case. Why do we have entry level? Why do we have low skilled employee populations easily filled, no challenge? And I would suggest to you that there are 2 reasons for that. One is internal and one is external. So the external is, are we in this area? Are we in the Rochester area, in the Monroe County area? Do we have an education system that is developing the skilled craft, the professional, the managerial skills that are necessary to fill the upper ranks of an organization? The internal is there something within an organization? Is there a glass ceiling within an organization? Hiring practices, like-mindedness, all cut from the same clothness that has created a system where upward mobility is not encouraged, is not developed in an organization. So is there something unique to the organization that prevents it? Could be a number of other reasons, but I would suggest to you at least those 2. External educational resources and internal operation. So how do we find such a thing? You go to the census. Big census year, right? As a matter of fact, when I went to set up this lesson, I believe the second link, it appears that they're beginning to archive 2010 census data, no doubt getting ready for 2020 census data. So that first link is a how-to navigate the census data to find a particular category of job, a particular geographic region, and a particular category of job to find those numbers on minority availability. The second link is a link to the census itself, where you can enter a geographic area, where you can enter an occupational area. And then the third one, which is what I refer to as archiving the data, I found only in PDF. And if you open that, and I would encourage you to do something like Google Supervisor. And I know one of the supervisory categories that pops up is supervision of landscaping. So for the city or the county, that would be any individual employed as a supervisor in a groundskeeping, landscaping organization or position in the county of Monroe. And the number of currently employed would inform you as to the goal that you should set for your own organization. Another search you can do in the PDF might be for library to see how many individuals, and you will see it broken down, by white, non-Hispanic, by African American, by Asian American, through all the equal employment EEOC minority categories, and you will see population and occupational numbers for each and every one of those. And that is how you arrive at your affirmative action plan. Oh, okay. So this was a shot that I had from last term. This, in fact, says first line supervisors of landscaping, does that say? Lawn service and groundskeeping. So if the city was looking to hire within that, or the county was, and you see that there's a white alone, we have a 96% in the local area. We'll discuss this when we all meet, because this is kind of clunky to explain to you, but if you just spend some time and take a look at the white alone, the black or African American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian alone, you will see the way the numbers break down, and in this case, don't break down, because the employment in this particular area is very low. So it would be very difficult to set goals that are loftier than what currently exist. Okay, 8% female employed in groundskeeping supervision. So as I said earlier, diversity is what you have. Managing by inclusiveness is what you do with it. Okay? Making the mix work. Okay? So I just want to spend a little bit of time, and then there's going to be a breakout exercise that I'm going to post separately that gets into it's something that I call an impact cycle. How do we get the biases that we have? How do we get the sense of self that we have, and how do we come to view other people? And how can that create obstacles in relating to each other and in becoming an inclusive people? So, but the alignment with the person, creating a diverse and inclusive workforce, the alignment with the person is what I tried to suggest to you earlier, which is that we absolutely want individuals in the workforce to know what the organizational values are. But more and more we exist in a workplace where it's important for an organization to understand what the personal values are. I would encourage you to take a look at the way some companies recruit. What values do they highlight? They often, more and more often, will highlight values that they know are important to the population. So you see green initiatives frequently. You see the simple fact of diversity and an inclusive workforce as a selling point for organizations, because they know that these values are more and more important to the individuals that they hire. So diversity and inclusion, diversity, the collective mixture in ways that we're different from and similar to each other, and the related tensions. And I often will ask a class, if you're similar to each other, what's the tension? Is there tension? Okay. So I'm going to ask that question when we meet. What are the tensions when you are similar to each other? The different from, I get that. So inclusiveness, inclusion, a strategy to embrace and achieve the diversity where people feel supported, listened to, and able to do their. We often talk about diversity using the metaphor of an iceberg. That is simply to say that there are things that are easily discernible. There are things that I can see looking out across a classroom or across a Zoom meeting that I might be able to access about these individuals who are at the other end of the equation. So race, age, gender, ethnicity, physical ability, maybe your behaviors. If I was watching you in class and I saw the way you were behaving in class, that would be easily discernible. Sexual orientation. This is interesting. This was an iceberg developed a number of years ago by a consultant for me doing a diversity program. And we had a long discussion on where sexual orientation goes, because it wasn't all that long ago that probably more often found below the water level. But not so much anymore, now more easily accessible for many people. So, but then there are those other things. So whether it's what is your marital status, do you have kids or don't you have kids? Um, the one that I like here in the red under the waterline is geographic location. And I would simply ask, who's traveled the farthest to be here? So what is your, by place of birth, who has traveled the farthest to be here? What are your goals, hopes, and dreams? You know, I often, sorry to be the boomer here, but I have called this in the past a Facebook exercise. That if I found your Facebook page or Instagram or uh, what would I learn about you? What would be the travels? What would be the passions? What would be the interests? Again, not in inappropriate ways, but just in a get to know you better. What makes you tick? How can I tap in to your passion and your interest? You know, to really have the best relationship that we can have in a workplace and make us as productive a workplace, right? So the diversity iceberg. Exclusion are those things that separates us. Sometimes we choose to be excluded. I don't want to participate. I'm not going to go to that party. I once said to a group of city employees, I think I said something like, imagine being the only person to not have received that hot wedding invitation for the season. And I had a hand go up and an individual said, I don't want to go to the wedding. I want to have my Saturday free. So we choose to exclude ourselves sometimes. Inclusion, that again, that all voices are heard, embracing the diversity, having a culture of respect and collaboration. So think a little bit about, how do you feel if you feel excluded? How do you feel if you feel left out, not a member of the team? Are you going to give it your all? Are you going to give it your best? If you're included, if you're brought into the fold, if you're listened to, respected, treated with some dignity, how are you going to feel? How are you going to perform? The business case. Key characteristics of a great place to work. One of the exercises that you're going to be completing after this class that I will share with you at a future time in the term are to answer 12 Gallup engagement questions. And these are the questions. Do you know what's expected of you at work? Do you have the material that you need to do the job correctly? At work, do you have an opportunity to do what you do best every day? In the last 7 days, have you received recognition or praise? Does your supervisor seem to care about you? Is there someone at work who encourages your development? Do your opinions seem to count? Does the mission and purpose of your organization make you feel good? Make you feel that your job is important? Are your associates, your fellow employees, committed to doing quality work? Do you have a best friend at work? That's one we're going to discuss a little bit when we all get together. How important is it to have a best friend? What does that mean to have a best friend at work, a friend at work? In the last 6 months, has someone at work talked to you about your progress? In the last year, have you had opportunities to learn and grow? And Gallup has found that in the answer to those questions, on a scale of 1 to 5, that the best performing organizations are easily detectable, that those who score the highest have a lower turnover by 22%, have higher customer satisfaction, 39% have a greater profitability, 27% and a greater productivity by 22%. The Gallup Q12, there will be an assignment coming out of this class for you to complete your own. It's a very simple exercise. You're ranking these 12 things on a scale of 1 to 5. I will then take those numbers and collate them and present them to you later in the term as if it were us as a work group. We'll pretend that we're a work group, and how did we. So Gallup has been doing this for over 20 years, moving on to our 25 years. They have literally millions of data points in workplaces that they have surveyed, and they release their results every 2 or 3 years. So I believe 2018 was the last release that they had officially. They find, and we've been doing better actually in the past several years, that before COVID, at least, we were doing better. That 34% of employees are engaged, actively engaged. They like their jobs. They're doing the best they can at work. 53% are disengaged, so they just kind of show up. And 13% are actively disengaged, which means they may in fact be actively sabotaging the organization. There is a YouTube, the very first link there is a YouTube video called Who's Sinking My Boat? And it's based on, I think, maybe the 2012, 2013. I think it was made in 2013. There is a follow-up to it that is an update based, I think, on 2018 on the sinking of the boat. All right, and you will see and have some discussion on that. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to put up a supplemental PowerPoint that is something that I call an impact cycle. It's still not heavy duty human resource related. It is simply how we come to view ourselves, how we come to view other people, what causes divisions among us. So a little bit of self-knowledge and how we come to have our perspective on life, how we view ourselves and others. I will post that separately. It will be part of your second session lesson. And so for now, I'll just say thanks and see you later.